We're really excited to be with you all today, talk about examining the wellness culture to boost resiliency in your workplace and organizations. And so, building off of all of this and kind of the direction we're headed to is talking about wellness culture, right? Because we've talked about resilience, we've talked about the different dimensions. And so, one of the things we want to get at today is really what is wellness culture? What is your organizational approach? Maybe you have a statement around wellness. What do you all see as the goal, right, that the organization is trying to maintain? So, wellness culture is specific to you, to your team, to your agency. So, what we want to talk about next is we kind of suggest, right, you have maybe some broader organizational goals. The first step, and some of you all, it sounds like, have engaged in that with your wellness committees too, is we suggest the first step is really finding out what wellness looks like in your organizations. And then after that, after thinking about what wellness could look like, what your definition of it, right, is for the organization, what it would actually look like if you were doing well, if you had a healthy workplace, you might be interested in doing a needs assessment to actually see where your organization kind of is at, like where are they currently related to some of these dimensions. But we wanted to share just some tools out there that could help us kind of collect data on where our employees are, right? And think about this as when we do needs assessments, right? Thinking about the areas of strength that are already going well in the organization that we can continue to foster, and then highlighting in a way too areas of improvement. And like you all said as well, it seems like employees responded more in some of these settings where there's an objective person or where their responses were kind of anonymous or confidential at the time, so that they could express some of the issues within the organization without fear, right, of consequences from sharing that kind of how they might be viewed within the organization too. And so there are so many different tools out there that can help us, right, collect data about these different dimensions, areas of wellness in the organization. And of course, we cannot cover all the tools that exist out there. Is way beyond the scope of our training, right, to cover all of them. But we did want to highlight a few free tools that you might want to explore more in depth. And these aren't necessarily ones that we're saying go out, use these today. We just wanted to provide an example of what is out there. Kind of what do these different tools actually get at? Do they measure burnout? Do they measure communication? Are they measuring things like leadership support, right? Maybe some areas that you're actually more interested in. Maybe there's ones that actually get at that flexible workspace, work hours too, outside external resources that could be provided. And so we're not endorsing any of these as specific tools, but it is really helpful that these are related ones to wellness in an organization and also are freely available, which we all love free. So just want to start by sharing some of these tools. And it sounded like for some of you all, the timeliness of feedback in response to some of these issues around wellness or culture in the organization might be part of your goal too. So not just providing a space for folks to kind of air issues, but then working to prioritize what's the top issue happening in your workspace, and then how can you implement steps to improve that. So one of those was designed by the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health, the Worker Well-Being Questionnaire. It has 16 different scales. Another word for scales, kind of like dimensions, right, that it measures, in 31 single items. So this one, I believe it takes about 30 minutes to do. It gets at dimensions like work evaluation and experience. So that might speak to some of what you all mentioned around having supervision from a like professional, right? Workplace policies and culture, so specific items right around the health of that workspace, policies that might be inhibiting or promoting work within the organization. Things about the physical environment, the safety, the climate. So you might also think of this, one of the things that came up when we were doing a survey of our employees, and then aspects that of the physical environment within our workplace was around restroom access, meditation room access. I know you all mentioned childcare as some of yours too. But for example, I think our building was one of the only ones kind of within a proximity that had a lactation room that someone could actually go into and use, especially if we had folks who were on a team, or maybe you're not in a formal like office setting where you can just close the door, providing that type of space. Restroom accessibility, thinking about ADA compliance as well. Can clients get into the building? If you have any employees who need additional accessibility measures, are those there in your physical environment too? Also things like health status, and then some of those outside of work experiences that you all kind of brought up in the beginning too, that folks might seek out those employee assistance programs, other types of resources like that for any home, community, larger society issues that are happening outside of work, but that are impacting them to an extent too, right? That may be impacting their work, not just their outside life. So this institute created also this total worker program. So they have a specific definition too of what worker well-being is, that you might, lend that might lend to your own definitions too, if you're still developing what wellness looks like within your own organization. Another one of the tools is, and this one is actually in a Google form, it's 55 questions, and they're all multiple choice. It takes about 20 minutes for employees to go through. In thinking about these two, this one has a whole host of different domains that way expands on those 4 or 5 from the last one. This is a free, it's an online tool. And I believe as well, some of these actually will report the results back to you. So you don't have to go through, average out these responses, figure out what the highest priority area is. Some of them will also do that kind of as a report on the back end, auto-generated, which could be a nice step that doesn't require extra kind of work from us, right? Or from the folks who are leading these wellness approaches and committees in your organization. So this one measures things like sources of stress at work for the individual, organizations, companies. Some of the questions ask things like, my job lets me use my skills and abilities. So getting at some of those trainings, right? The development they have, maybe mentorship, leadership opportunities. Others that ask, at the place where I work, I'm treated with respect, or is your work emotionally demanding? So this could highlight, right, underlying kind of issues within an organization, or areas that you're doing well around support, respect of employees, recognition of skills, education, right? I know a lot of us work in spaces where our employees have advanced education, advanced clinical training, right, different licensure, maybe certification and specific therapeutic techniques too. So recognizing those resources, those skills that they're contributing to the environment. And this questionnaire is based off of that same Institute Occupational Safety and Health Quality of Work like questionnaire, but this one is much shorter. And like I mentioned too, this one is freely out there as a Google form too. But it was developed with a team of researchers and occupational health and safety experts. And the results for many of these two, right, would be anonymous, confidential. But as I'm walking through these two, feel free, if there are other ones that you have used so far or that you've seen out there, using this group as a resource too, feel free to put those in the chat, even if it's just the name and you don't have a link to the specific one you use right now. But what other ones have you seen out there that have really given you information that has been helpful for moving forward and setting goals with your organization? Yeah, and this one will give you a group level kind of report. So if you had multiple departments, yeah, it's like, okay, a climate survey each year. So maybe your organization already has something in place too that you could use. So maybe you don't need to go out and collect your own source of data around this, or you could get maybe a smaller portion of that, right, is around workplace safety and health and wellness. And you could ask to have those kind of anonymized or confidential responses back. Another one that I think we've mentioned a couple different times is this Copenhagen burnout inventory, which measures specifically burnout. So if you wanted to, we've talked about a lot of different things, not just today, but across this training. So thinking about, right, is burnout actually being experienced in your workplace? If it's low, maybe you don't need to put interventions in place and strategies in place to reduce burnout, but instead you could work on things like fostering communication or the healthy workplace or these flexible workspaces and plans. But this inventory is free. You could very easily put it into, a Survey Monkey, into a Google form, whichever form you wanted, that would collect anonymous responses for you. And this gets at contributors to burnout. So again, thinking about things personally that are going on. This was things like experiences of kind of stressors in their work or their family life, experiencing increased kind of work-life crises. Then there were things like work-related burnout, not being supported in their role. How often do they feel worn out? How often do they feel inability to kind of engage in their workspace? And this helps us understand too some of these questions around the sources of like emotional exhaustion and ongoing stress too. The one area that this one I think is unique to the other ones is really around this client related burnout piece. So this dimension asks questions like, does it drain your energy to work with clients? Do you find it challenging to engage with clients? And gets at some of those, are they actually struggling to even have those interactions with clients and patients? Is that contributing to more negative or lower experiences within the organization too? And we actually use this one with our community practitioners the past couple of years, and a majority of folks really reported more personal and work-related burnout issues. Folks across the board, across professions, social works, pharmacy, nursing, and we had some other folks in, in like pediatrics, palliative health, and those things too. It was really around just struggling emotional and physical exhaustion for the employees at an individual level. So this wouldn't get at examples, right, of what is actually causing that, but that's something that you could add on. And what we did too, right, is asking those open-ended questions. So maybe you're using one of these assessments and then also providing a space where they can provide anonymous kind of responses, right? What are things you're struggling with in work? What are things you're struggling with outside of work? And then follow-up questions too, right, around how can we support you in X, Y, and Z? What is the benefit that would make you more likely to stay at this job in the next 5 years? Those types of things too. Well, one of the other things too, when we were collecting initial data for our wellness committee around what the priorities were, we actually segmented out by employee group. So thinking about like staff needs, full-time staff versus part-time staff. Some of the issues actually that were raised when we were looking at those things differently were expectations really around like even flexibility hours, like some of you mentioned, for part-time folks versus full-time folks, or for now that we have those different work modalities, what are the policies for our remote folks and what does it look like for our in-person people? And is there alignment between those policies, or are there kind of divides right between what the work from home folks are able to engage in, what the flexibility looks like versus an in-person? And is that a source of maybe some conflict within your organization? Are there ways that you can make changes to that would create a better sense, right, of community, of respecting different people's skills and contributions to the larger organization too? And like we said, these are not the only tools out there. There's a range of ones. Some do have fees for using them. Maybe that's built into organizational budget that you do have. Well, thank you all for being here with us today. Great to see you all.